Good morning. This is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook from Friday, August the 7th through Monday, August the 10th. So we have quite a bit to talk about for this weekend with this frontal boundary that is going to be nudging to the south over this weekend. So we're going to be stuck with quite a little bit of rain and shower activity in association with it. Right now, this front is sitting over North Carolina. And these sort of east-west rippling fronts are called undulating fronts. So that's kind of what we're stuck with right now. That happens when frontal boundaries become pinched between high pressures. So right now we have high pressure to the south. We even have a lobe of high pressure, Bermuda high, left over there. And so what this does is it sort of creates a large ridge to the south underneath the boundary. And then we have another ridge of high pressure building down from the north. So we actually have a northerly wind here. And then we have this westerly flow, or southwesterly to west-southwesterly flow below it. And so we have to watch these low pressures as they track off the coastline this time of the year. A little further north off of North Carolina, the water's a little bit cooler, so it's a little less conducive for development of any kind of tropical nature. But as this boundary dips to the south, and we look at high pressures to the north, we always watch those areas. But for right now, what we have is we have this southwesterly flow that's sort of peeling up ahead of this front. Now, when we talk about in forecasts, you often see zonal flow. And I'm going to explain zonal flow real quick. Zonal flow is referring to the baroclinic zone, which lies ahead of a frontal boundary. So when it's kind of like an avenue, as the frontal boundary pushes into the area and high pressure ahead of it is sort of bringing in its own synoptic flow, the frontal boundary tends to line up all of the flow at the surface and even up to the mid-levels ahead of it. So we get this avenue of winds, and that's called a zonal flow because all of the isobars and isotachs and everything are lining up ahead of it for a solid flow from one direction, and that actually becomes low-level jetting. So we see low-level jetting all the time, and that basically is caused by zonal flow at the surface where cold fronts are coming and all of the air has to move up along it. So, and that's just in accordance with the clockwise rotation of high pressure and the counterclockwise rotation of low pressures. The cold front sweeping into an area always lines up the winds ahead. So what we're looking at for today is we see some residual rains and showers going on this morning. We do have some drier air out here to the west in Georgia and then moving into the upstate of South Carolina to the mountains. So let's go ahead and look at the infrared radar. Now at this time it's a little after 5 a.m. so we can't get a visible satellite, so I always refer to the infrared loop. We can see some of these, the clouding in the area, a lot of this moisture moved off to the northeast. We saw some significant storming yesterday. We had a couple of rounds of it, one in the mid-afternoon hours and mid to late afternoon, and then the other one came a little bit later in the evening, right past dark. So we see this dry air moving in from the west. We do see that there could be some connection with the Gulf today, and let's look at the Charleston radar, and here comes some of these rains. Storms will be traversing the area through the morning, and then we should start to get some sunlight behind it. I think we'll probably see some residual cloud debris up in the sky, some high humidities today. A lot of this moisture, that there was a lot of widespread scattered thunder showers and rains yesterday all over South Carolina and even eastern Georgia. So, you know, when we talk about our sea breezes and thunderstorming in the Piedmont, like the Piedmont troughs and inland troughs and prefrontal builds, there's a lot of moisture in the soil. So soil retention has a lot to do with some of these sea breezes in this kind of setup because the atmosphere is juicy at the surface, and what we get is we have sand hills in the mid-state that release moisture faster when the sun comes out and the day heats up. And then you have clays and loams that sort of linger down right below mid-state into the lowlands that retain moisture, and then you have low-level circulations that develop between the two. One's able to evaporate and release moisture faster due to heat, and the other one is slower, so you get these low-level circulations that fire off thunderstorms. And I think that even with the drier air that's moving in from the west, we probably could see a few thunderstorms pop up today, and they're going to be very fast-forming. So those inland thunderstorms and inland trough areas provide the outflow that goes out over the ocean. And once again, we get back into our sea breeze talk where you see these thunderstorms developing in this area. And the outflow or the return flow from the thunderstorms out to the ocean and then comes back in. Especially with the southwest flow today, we'll see a west to east flow in the upper atmosphere. actually being able to give a stronger return flow, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. We also have to keep an eye on winds becoming a little bit more west-southwest, but I think our sea breezes might be able to steer a little bit more of a southerly element into it. So let's get back to visible. Now here's our water vapor loop, and where you can see that pocket of dry air moving in from the west, and our upper level winds are west to east today, and that's supported by weather balloon readings last night, and we'll have to wait and see what the weather balloon readings shows for today, but I do think that our mid to upper level winds will be a west to east flow. So here, water vapor simply shows how much moisture is in the atmosphere. We can see that the boundary is back here, it's over Kentucky, and then you can see it's draped over North Carolina. And like I said, if it does make somewhat of a close call to the Gulf states, we could see that Gulf moisture pull up, and we'll see that more into this weekend. But for right now, let's look at the surface of earth.nullschool.net. I'm going to back down to surface level on here. Let that load. Okay, so here we go. Here's our surface Bermuda high pressure out here. It's ridging into southern Florida, but there's another lobe of high pressure over southern Florida. I expect that to drift a little bit to the north today, just as heat fluxing pulls it up the coastline, and then we have this ridge of high pressure expanding all the way over the Gulf. And you can see these lower level winds lining up from the southwest. Now as we go higher in the atmosphere at 500 millibars, or 500 HPA per this one, that's about 18,000 feet up. We should start to see some more of this west to east, and this is somewhat following the jet stream. The jet stream is a little bit more to the north, but you can see there's this northwest dip and then a westerly push. So that means clouds at the mid-levels will be pushing from west to east. That all helps with sea breezing, especially ahead of a front that's going to increase the prefrontal build. And let's go up to 250 HPA or 250 millibars. That's about 34,000 feet, and we'll see a stronger jet stream over the northern tiers of the country, dipping down into the southeast. And this is what the models might be picking up, is helping to push that frontal boundary a little further down into the southeast today. However, I think it's going to line up a little bit more to our west, but you can definitely see that downward dip and then a west to east flow for the cloud tops to be able to be nudged towards the coastline. So if we look at the ADS product for aviation, I always like to look at this for low-level jetting just because it's another source of information, and it furthers the evidence. We're going to look at 3,000 feet, flight level at 3,000 feet, and the forecast for today at 7 a.m. is for 25 to 30 knots from the west-southwest. And if we even go up to 6,000 feet, we see the west-southwest and even the southwest jet start falling off to about 25 and then 30 knots, and then we can even run that further into the future, and we can see 9 a.m. and then we go to 10 a.m. and we can move that across, and we see that jet sort of increase along the coastline, and we get back down to 3,000 feet. Let's go a little bit lower and back it to 7 a.m. and I want to run that a little bit. So we go to 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 12 o'clock today, and we see that jet start to turn a little bit more southwest along the coastline, just barely. We're seeing 35 knots. We're seeing kind of a healthy low-level jet today, and looking at that information, we might be able to say that we have potential for decent moderate winds along the coastline. If we look at the weather balloon, I know that this is a little bit technical for most, but you can see last night's weather balloon reading at 7 p.m. just about all the winds at all levels were lined up from west to east in varying speeds. So we had basically about 15 knots here, and we go all the way up to 30 knots. So the highest wind bar, actually 35 knots at the surface here, near the surface, about 3,000 feet or so, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet. And so that's just further evidence last night that we had a west to east flow. And just not indicative of today because the weather balloon reading has not come out yet. All right, I want to take a look at the jet stream. Now here's our jet stream. The jet stream has a very, very slight dip from north to south, and it looks a little bit something like this right now. That's what's helping push that front down into North Carolina. Now if we run this model forward in time, going to 12 o'clock today, we don't see a whole lot of change with it. We see that the jet stream has this very slight dip. Let me go ahead and get the editing tool out. Just the same slight dip. maybe a little bit further down into North Carolina. So I think southeast North Carolina and Outer Banks might have a little bit more effects from this today. And if we keep going forward into Saturday, then we see a really strong dip push down, and I think that's what's going to get our boundary pushed down below us. So like I said, it's very tricky weekend with this frontal boundary. So I'm going to go right to our local level. Let's look at Folly Beach. We're showing a westerly flow this morning, west-southwest, 12 knots. And we're seeing some ups and downs on the nocturnal jetting or low-level jetting this morning. And as the sun comes up and things start to get a little bit warmer, once these rains sort of leave the area, we'll get a better picture of what's going to happen. But right now we have 12 knots west-southwest at Folly Beach. We have 10 knots from the west at Fort Sumter in the Charleston Harbor. 9 knots, that's a little bit shadowed on Sullivan's Island, so land shadowed. And so is Isle of Palms, but Isle of Palms has a little bit of a cleaner reading from west-southwest at 11 knots. And let's take a look at Isle of Palms. Not quite as much of a low-level jet going on this morning, and that partially has to do with some land shadowing effects there. But if we run the models for today, let's see what those look like. I'm willing to bet we're going to see a lot of different opinions here because this tricky frontal boundary to the north. And we see the North American models are both lining up for higher numbers. And we have the high resolution rapid refresh model is actually showing this red one right here is showing more of a westerly flow and then actually going west-northwest. So that's showing that the frontal boundary might actually make it through, or even low pressure in the area could be prompting those winds. Even low pressure to the north removed can bend the wind field to the west-northwest as they pass to the east. So it may be picking up on that. And most of these other models are keeping the winds right around southwesterly flow. With sort of an upwards trend into the early afternoon and a downwards trend into this afternoon. So we'll have to see what happens as the day progresses. It's not all the time that we can actually come up with a forecast. However, when I did the forecast Tuesday for the week, I did say 14 to 18 knots for Friday, and that's what I'm going to stick with. I think we're going to have enough support from sea breezing plus with the prefrontal build to keep a little bit of a southerly element into it and keep a southwest wind. So I'm going to call 14 to 18 knots today. Now as tomorrow comes around and we look at what's going on with the frontal boundary, I think we're going to see high pressure building down. Let me go back to the surface map. I think we're going to see high pressure building down from the north, and this low pressure out here is going to hang back. It's going to be a slow mover. The jet stream is going to dip tomorrow like we saw on the jet stream map. We'll develop a lobe of high pressure here as a result. With all this ridging going on, Appalachian high pressure will build down, and then that will actually build in more of a northeast flow behind this frontal boundary as it dips to the south. So I think that the dip may end up something like this. This frontal boundary should line up today. Let me back up a little bit. I'm expecting this low to head to the northeast and this frontal boundary to line up something like this, where we end up with more of a southwesterly flow. So that's why I'm calling 14 to 18 knots today. As this high pressure builds down into it, this boundary will probably look a little something like this for tomorrow. It may be draped directly overhead or maybe just to our south. Either way, it looks like it could be a messy day in store unless this drier air filters in and we're able to get a little less moisture. I think we're going to see quite a few clouds and rains and storms. Above the boundary, I'm expecting a northeasterly flow to even east-northeasterly flow. Along the boundary, I'm expecting a southeast flow, and then below the boundary, I'm expecting more of a west-southwest. So, like I said, tricky. We'll see southeast along, west-southwest below, east-northeast above it. So we have three or four different directions of wind, so pretty variable through the weekend. I'll go ahead and call for the boundary to just press through Saturday and Sunday and start fizzling out. So we should see sort of a northeast or east-northeast wind tomorrow, and this high pressure is not going to be very strong to the north moving down. It's going to be about 1,014, 1,015 millibars at best. So I would expect maybe low teens, possible mid-teens east-northeast winds behind the boundary. If the boundary sticks over us, it's going to be messy, it's going to be variable, and that's pretty much just going to be the nature of it. And then even into Sunday, that boundary should be to our south again, where we have more of a modest easterly flow, and then even into Monday where things start lining up from the southeast as this high pressure moves actually down and closer to us. So This lobe of high pressure that will develop will sort of come down near us. Now, the closer high pressure center comes, the weaker the winds become. So this frontal boundary should start to fizzle out or hang. It might even hang down over northern Florida and give Tampa Bay another round of powerful rains and storms. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. But I don't see a lot for this weekend. I think the peak flow is going to be today. So again, I'm calling for 14 to 18 knots today. Modest winds at best over the weekend with east-northeast. East-northeast winds could potentially reach mid-teens Saturday, and then as we get into Sunday, we have more of an easterly flow as that high pressure nears us. I don't think we're going to get anything. We are past the low teens, so we could easily say 9 to 13 knots. And then when we get into Monday, southeasterly winds stay mild to modest, and we give it 8 to 12 knots. And that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report. Have a good weekend.